Hey all, welcome back to the Highland Greenhouse here at Carlton Carnivores. I've got another marsh pitcher plant spotlight for you guys. This is a species that is one of the ones I would actually suggest as perhaps a better beginner species if you're trying to get into the Heliamphora genus. A lot of the hybrids, of course, are going to be the easiest plants to start with, but if you really want a pure species, this is one of the ones that I would definitely best suggest, and that is Heliamphora minor. The name, of course, translates basically to small pitcher plant or small marsh pitcher plant, and you can easily see why, because these are full-grown flowering size plants and they are maxing out at about 4 inches tall here. It is a small species overall. Only a few forms will get a little bit larger than this, and so it's easy to keep in a relatively small area, which means really good for a terrarium type setup where you can control the temperatures a lot easier. And these guys are also a little bit more tolerant of warmer temperatures than most of the other species are as well. So that makes it also good for kind of a beginner startup species to work with. So these guys are endemic to Ollantaytambo and kind of the surrounding slopes around the base of that mountain in kind of the northeast corner of the Table Mountain ranges in Venezuela. So they can be found down near the lowlands, kind of around 1,000 meters in elevation or so, where it's still relatively cool, admittedly, but it's not as cool as what all the other species experience up on the tops of the tepuis, where this guy also grows up to around, I think it's 2,100 meters or so in elevation, so a good 6,500, 7,000 feet in elevation. So you have varieties that will tolerate warmer conditions and other varieties that are, again, more like other Heliamphora. And of course, if you already have a lot of Heliamphora, you can grow them alongside those as well in those cooler conditions, and they'll be very, very happy in that as well. Again, this species typically averages between 3 and 4 inches tall, even at maturity. Some forms will occasionally get up to maybe 6 inches tall, but that's about as big as they get, not very large. And the standard forms here, they are roughly funnel-shaped in kind of the lower half to 2/3. Don't mind this guy knocking over. They were recently repotted and the roots are still short, so they're a little floppy right now. But they have kind of a funnel-shaped lower half to 2/3, and then they narrow just above that. That's where kind of the digestive zone is, and then they narrow above that before opening out into a broader mouth that kind of slopes down forward into the crease where the basically what used to be the sides of the flat leaf have come together to create the wing of the pitcher. And then, of course, on top of the pitcher, they have their little tiny nectar spoons. On this species, it's usually sat on a distinctive little short, thin neck, and then the nectar spoon itself is slightly helmet-shaped and kind of circular in appearance. That's pretty standard for this species. Now, the normal form of this plant is fairly glabrous plant, so it might feel slightly velvety on the side, but generally it doesn't really have any hairs or anything. The inside has very, very short, minute little hairs that stick down in towards the pitcher, and that helps to kind of drive the insect down in there, but the outside is relatively smooth. And the coloration is kind of variable in the species. A lot of them will be kind of like this plant. You can see they get these nice red veins, sometimes blushing red in the nectar spoon, but they otherwise stay fairly green. But the some forms may actually get this lovely orange or reddish overall cast, and there's a couple that even turn really, really deep purplish, almost black throughout. Those are very rare and expensive forms, but they exist as well. So there's a lot of color variation in these guys. But in addition to the normal Heliamphora minor variety here, there is a second form that comes from the tops of the tepuis, and why this form exists, I'm not entirely sure anybody knows, but it is quite cool. It's very, very much more rare and expensive as well. But this is Heliamphora minor variety pilosa. And in the close-up I will show you guys, when this is fully mature, these plants, they not only have much, much larger hairs sticking down in the mouth of the pitcher here, but they also are covered in fuzz on the exterior of the pitcher as well. Very distinctive, very easy to see, these little silvery hairs all over, and they often do have a darker overall color than some of the other minor forms, so it's a really high contrast look. Now, why exactly this thing is hairy when pretty much everything else about it is about the same as your standard variety minor form, fairly rounded nectar spoon, sometimes a little more helmeted, but not by much. The same structure there, the same kind of short, squat, funnel-shaped pitchers, but they're hairy. Why? Who knows? Especially since they do occur at the same elevations as other populations that do not have these hairs. Perhaps it's the beginning of a speciation point, and these will eventually diverge into something else on top of that mountain, but who knows? We'll have to wait and see. But it's a very, very cool plant. Definitely a little more difficult to get a hold of. Now, with these guys, their habitats are, like most other Heliamphora, they tend to live in very sparse, loose soils, kind of down in rocky cracks and crevices where bits of debris and stuff have collected, or around the edges of pools where moss and stuff have grown up, because everything else gets washed away by the torrential rains on the tops of those mountains. So those little bare bits of soil are where the colonies gain root and start to spread out from there. So in cultivation, you kind of have to recreate those conditions that they need in order to grow well. Now again, this species in general, more so the typical form than Pilosa, you want to keep this cooler. It's more tolerant of warm temperatures than many other species, but preferably you still want to try and keep temperatures below 80 degrees Fahrenheit during the day and dropping down somewhere into the 50s at night. 50 degrees Fahrenheit, mind. And you want to keep that all year round. Now, if you have the way to just keep these guys kind of at a constant cool temperature all the time, like constantly 65 degrees, you might also get them to do well there. But if the temperatures rise, then they also need a corresponding fall at night to kind of offset that. They need those cool temperatures in order to survive long term. Otherwise, they kind of burn themselves out and collapse. You want a loose, fairly airy, but also very moist soil to kind of represent they're constantly getting rained on, but they also don't really sit in truly waterlogged soils because most of that runs off really quick. So a very loose 1-to-1 or maybe even 2-to-1 perlite and long fiber sphagnum mix is good for these guys. That way it's always moist, but you're never going to quite have it sopping wet, especially if you allow the soil surface to just barely dry in between waterings. Then they'll be happy. And then, of course, they are living on the tops of those mountains basically at the equator. So it's very, very strong sunlight exposure whenever the sun does come out up there. And even during the cloudy, stormy periods, there's still quite a bit of light that's making its way through there. So these guys need a lot of strong light. Full sun, if you could manage it, while also keeping the temperatures cool. But otherwise, the strongest artificial lights you can provide, 5,000 to 7,000 lumen bulbs that are kept maybe 1 to 2 feet above the plant at most, so that they develop the best coloration and the best growth form. Because if they don't get enough light, you will eventually get etiolated pitchers where the bases are really thin, the tops are really broad and spread out, and they're not going to be good at like capturing anything. They'll flop over. So if you have good color like this, then you know that you've got enough light for them. And if you're lucky, if you've had them happy for long enough, you will eventually see them flower. Now, this is an already spent flower stalk, but it's got all the structures that we can talk about on it still. Those stalks start off with, they'll usually have 1 or 2 bracts that form that actually usually have basically fully formed pitchers on them. And then as that stalk goes up, it'll grow to 1 to 3 feet tall sometimes and form these more typical bracts. Sometimes they still kind of have a hollow half pitchers on the back, but they're otherwise fairly typical leaf looking. And in between those, you'll get flowers that have anywhere between 4 and 7 petals. 5 and 6 is usually your standard. And they start out sometimes pink tone, bright white, and when they're just barely opening, the female part, the stigma, will actually be receptive to receiving pollen. But the male parts, the anthers, will not be releasing pollen at that time. Instead, a little bit later, once the flower is fully open, the stigma stops being receptive and the anthers ripen and release pollen. That way it encourages cross-pollination between plants for better genetic diversity and a better chance that the offspring will survive good. But if you only have one plant and you still want to try and get seeds, you can hope that you get multiple flowers, because these stalks may produce one, they may produce up to 12, 15 flowers in a row. And they will open sequentially, each one a few days to a week after the last. So if you have one that has ripened and started to green out and release pollen, you can collect that pollen. The anthers are typically buzz pollination triggered, so you need either a tuning fork or to very carefully flick them with like a toothpick or something to mimic the actions of buzzing bee wings to get that pollen to shake out of the pollen tubes. And you can collect that on something and then take that, and once the next flower is just barely starting to open and the stigma is ready, transfer that pollen in there, and hopefully you'll pollinate that, and several months later that swollen pod will brown and crack open, and you'll have these little disc-like papery round seeds. Sow those on the soil surface, and then wait several months more for them to sprout, and then several years for them to go through their cycle of maturing. The immature pictures on these guys look really funky too. They're just kind of a little tube with kind of a flared mouth and a hook for a lid. And that's pretty much the same for all the different species too. They only start to get their distinctive like nectar spoons and such once they start producing mature pitchers after a couple years. But it is definitely an act of patience with these guys, whether pollinating them and trying to grow from seeds or simply waiting for them to grow big enough to divide, because it takes several years, even with like heavy feeding, to get these guys to start spreading and branching enough to do that. Which is why in the wild, when you see really, really big 1 to 3, 4, 5 foot clumps, those are plants that have been there sometimes for a couple centuries to get that big. So they're very slow growing, very long-lived plants, but certainly, if you have the time and patience to work with them, very beautiful, interesting things to work with and grow. Now that is about all that I have for that species right now. If there's anything that I've missed, if you got questions, comments, make sure to leave them below the video here. If you'd like to learn more about the stuff that I work with, certainly you can find photos and video tidbits on social media, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, etc., all at Carlton Carnivores, or the blog and database that I have on my website at carltoncarnivores.com. And if you'd like to help support this channel, certainly liking these videos, leaving comments, sharing them, subscribing to the channel so you don't miss anything coming up. That all definitely helps. But you can also support in a more financial manner by perhaps buying some of the plants that are available at the website shop. Currently, that includes some of these marsh pitchers, Heliamphora, minor, and eggs appendiculata, as I'm working on this video right now. But others will also be coming up and sporadically available in the future. But there are other plants available there. There's merchandise and a few other things if you're interested. You can also become a supporter at patreon.com/hcarlton, where you get early access to the videos, exclusive merchandise. I do monthly seed contests, so you can get a hold of things that you're not going to probably find on the website or are very expensive on the website. You can just get for the cost of membership. Or one-time donations at places like Coffee or direct through PayPal as well. Most of the links for these things will be in the video description below. But until next time, I'm Hawken Carlton, and this is Carlton Carnivores.